Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 35 of Global Contenders, the review series for Gran Turismo's touring car lineup. And in this particular pick, we're featuring a vehicle which you don't see used that much by most players, but it's kind of understandable why that's the case. It's easy to overlook the car in the dealership, and it is overshadowed by its older, but in many ways more impressive sibling. Now, the Impreza Touring Car of the older shape, the non-premium, is a very, very popular choice of touring car. It's not difficult to see why. We've already discussed that car in this series. It's a brilliant touring car. This vehicle is good in its own way, but is very easily overshadowed by that vehicle. Now, speaking purely for the facts of both cars, the older model is the more impressive and faster vehicle. But that does not mean that this is a bad car, or that you should dismiss potentially buying one. Now, of the two, if I had to say which one you should buy, I would probably say the older model, because it is the quicker overall, and that's what most people want. Of course, it's a racing car, you want to win. But I actually prefer this vehicle of the two. Now, visually, it's a full premium. You can paint the car whatever colour you want, and those things, although trivial technically, are actually quite important, because personalisation is a big part of owning a car, be it in real life or in a game, and car fans can appreciate that. If you're in it just to win, you probably don't care about that. If you're in it because you like cars as well, then that will matter to you. Personally, it does matter to me. Having that increased level of detail and customisation will always be an advantage, as far as I'm concerned. But I can understand why people wouldn't care so much about that. People who just want to win and will use whatever car will get them there. If that's the kind of person you are, then you'd be better off buying the older Impreza. Now, that being said, this car is significantly cheaper than the older Impreza. That's a $500,000 credit car. This is 217,000 credits. Less than half the price. That's pretty impressive. Now, what do you get for that? That's the question. Well, being a Subaru, not surprisingly, you do get a 2-litre Boxer 4 engine, and the performance is, on paper at least, comparable to the road version. You're looking at 568 horsepower, 503 foot-pounds of torque, 1,140 kilos, and just under 500 horsepower per tonne. That's very, very similar across the board to the road-going version of this Impreza sedan. So is it that much better than the road car? Could you just get the road version, give it a flat floor, and see if it's cheaper? Potentially you could, but that doesn't always work in these scenarios, because if you're in a touring car lobby, they're probably not going to allow you 9 times out of 10 to use a tuned road car, regardless of how similar it is to the touring car. And you do have to bear that in mind. Unfortunately, a lot of online racing does involve semantics, and although that can be very annoying when you know that there's a better car option out there, and believe me, I feel you in that regard. I've entered lobbies for GT6, pulled out the Nomad Diablo, and got told that I can't use it, despite the fact that it is a GT6 competition vehicle. Lobbies that allow the Ferrari FXX as a road car, for instance. Ridiculous, but people do it regularly. So I can understand why things like that can get annoying. They certainly can. And this is for those occasions. Yes, on paper, it is very similar to the road car, and there's not much of a difference between the prices if you fully tune the road car or just buy this one. So really, it's a case of how much better is the touring car. Can it turn those similar numbers into better track performance? Well, yes and no, and pretty much in the ways that you'd expect to be yes and no. Around corners, yes. In a straight line, no. The increased downforce will always mean that top speed will suffer. The road-going Impreza of this shape can do around 220, 225-ish without NOS, without slipstream. This car, not as much. Not a huge drop, but not as much nonetheless. Off the line, it's still pretty quick, and the biggest improvement, as you would hope and expect, is in the handling department. The grip, the drivability, the driver feedback, the control, the way the car handles itself, all of those things are improved. Now, you can make the road car really good in that regard, so the fact that the touring car is even better It really goes to show just how good this car can be around corners, and this may be a controversial comment, but I actually think this has better handling than the older model Impreza. The older model is definitely quicker, but I definitely prefer this one around tighter circuits. Now, as far as competitive range, there are better cars you can get for less cash. 217 grand is pretty good for a touring car, but it is still a fictional one, and you can get other fictional cars for a similar price. For instance, the Skyline touring cars don't cost that much more, and they are significantly faster. So it's not the best choice of touring car, but it is definitely not a bad one. And I'm not even an Impreza fan, so I'm not biased for or against this vehicle. I just lay out the facts, and the facts are, it's not the best, but it definitely ain't the worst either. As far as PP, when fully tuned, it's maybe a little too high at 590, but at the same time you can understand why it's that high. The Subaru, just like the Mitsubishi Evo, is a great performance car anyway, so making a race car version of it is pretty much always going to have a pretty high PP level. And speaking about the Mitsubishi Evo, that brings up a very strange point about this car, and this is perhaps the main downside. It's not a hugely important one in the grand scheme of things, but it's one which doesn't make much sense. Touring cars, generally, cannot be used as rally cars on Gran Turismo, with the exception of some. And one of those exceptions is the Mitsubishi Evo 9 touring car. You can use that on dirt and snow. Why then can this car not be used on dirt and snow? That makes no sense to me at all. They're basically the same generation of vehicle, not far off at least, and they're very similar. Their spec, the price, the category of vehicle, they're not all that far apart. In fact, they're probably the nearest rivals within the category. So why the Evo is allowed to do that and this one isn't really does not make sense to me, and unfortunately it hinders the car, because part of the Subaru Impreza legacy is, of course, the rally performance. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.